So you're playing in multiple bands. You got this band over here that you play with, you got another band over here that's tossing you dates, and you're getting calls from others. And that's great, right? Well, in this video, I'm going to show you why playing in multiple bands may not be all it's cracked up to be, and why you should give it some serious consideration before you jump into multiple bands. So let's get to it. Hey, and welcome to Music Space, where we help working musicians just like you learn how to quickly and easily make a living with your craft. So if you're new here to the channel, hit that subscribe button and the notification bell. That way you'll be notified when new videos are uploaded to the channel. So as I stated, a lot of musicians are playing in multiple bands. It's not uncommon nowadays for musicians to be performing regularly with 2, 3, 4, sometimes even 5 or 6 bands. And on the surface, this all seems great, right? I mean, you're getting more work, you're playing more frequently, and those opportunities that you're playing are probably leading to at least a few more opportunities. So it's all good, right? Well, there's another side of this that really seriously needs to be considered. And it's honestly going to be kind of tough to realize because there's a lot of ego involved with saying that you play with multiple bands and you're getting these dates. You think it makes you seem cool and important and in demand. And for a lot of musicians, this type of thing is the primary reason they play in multiple bands. And the evidence of this is some of the multiple bands that they play in don't pay well. They don't enjoy the music that the band plays, nor do they really like the people in the band, but yet they still do it. But nevertheless, I think we musicians are smart and intelligent enough to sit down our egos, at least for a second, to have some discussion about these types of things that affect us. Now, I'm going to show you how playing in multiple bands can be a problem. And at the end of this video, I'm going to give you a key way to handle playing in multiple bands if you do in fact play in multiple bands. So make sure you stick around to the end of the video for that. Now, one of the things that need to be considered in this is the fact that it is inevitable that at some point you're going to have to turn down dates with one or two of the bands for one of the others that you play with. So now you have this situation where it seems like you're not dependable. Like no one in the band, nor the band leader or anything like that, can just depend on you to be there when the band gets gigs. And the problem with that is now the band that you've turned down this gig with has to find another player to fill your position. And in a lot of cases, the band has to wait to accept this gig that they're being offered so that they can make sure that they have all the players, for the band. And also, this puts the other musicians in the band in this sort of precarious situation because now they have to adjust to a new player, and this new player probably won't come in knowing the music as well as you did. And as a result of doing this across the multiple bands that you play in, because it will affect them all at some point, none of the multiple bands are as strong as they can be. So essentially, everyone suffers. So this is definitely one thing you should be thinking about when you're considering playing in multiple bands. Now, right before we get to the next thing, if you're getting value out of this video so far, do me a quick favor and hit the subscribe button and the like button on this video. Go ahead and do that now. That lets me know that you really appreciate this content, and it lets me know the type of content I should make for you in the future. Now, another issue that should be considered when playing in multiple bands is that the relationships and the camaraderie across the members of those bands suffer. So one of the biggest things that go into making a band good and fun to play with are the relationships that you have with the members in that band. You have your favorite player, or the player you're used to, or the player that you're most friendly with and that you have a relationship outside of the music scene on keys, drums, bass, guitar, whatever, and the vibe is just stronger. I mean, you have a groove going and you can just kind of tell in the facial expressions of, your favorite keys player, drummer, bass player, or whatever, what they're going to do next because you've learned to feed off each other like that. And those are the types of things that make a band really good and really fun to play with. And this kind of thing is built over time. But now you're playing in multiple bands, and the band that you're normally playing with, that you have this camaraderie with, has to get a new fill-in player. And this new player is not going to come in with that same sort of relationship and camaraderie as you have with the band. And again, that just makes everything worse as a musical situation. It doesn't necessarily mean that the band is going to tank, but it's definitely not going to make it as good as it could be. So that whole vibe thing and the facial expressions and the band just being locked because of those type of relationships is not going to exist in that circumstance. And not only that, the musicians that are in the band that are normally in the band aren't, as comfortable because they probably have to spend time coaching this new player through the music so that they can ensure that the band sounds great as a whole. So this is another thing that really needs to be considered when you're talking about or thinking about playing in multiple bands. And another thing is, and if we're going to be honest about this, the way that you're probably going to determine which band you're going to play with if all of these multiple bands get a date, say on the same day, is which band is paying you the most money, or which band has the gig that you want to play most. In other words, you're making a decision about which band you're going to play with at any given time based on your own personal interests and desires. And that, my friend, is the literal definition of selfish. And it's really this type of selfishness that spreads and sort of makes the whole music community, the whole gigging industry, sort of bad for everybody. And I won't get too deep into this, but the way that this usually plays out is a lot of musicians start acting in these sort of selfish ways that I'm talking about here, and the bands get affected as a whole because the band doesn't show up as good and as ready as they can be because they got 3 or 4 substitute players on stage. And then because the bands are not as good or as ready as they can be, they're not getting as many callbacks and as many gigs as they possibly could be if they had shown up better. Thus, everyone gets affected. And again, you have to think about this. This is not one thing that just happens in one of the multiple bands that you play with. If you're doing this type of thing and you're choosing this band this day, choosing this band the next day, and then the other band the next weekend and things like that, this is something that's going to spread through all of the bands that you're playing with. So again, this is definitely another thing you should keep in mind in your multiple band situations, or if you're considering playing in multiple bands. Now, another thing that needs to be considered is the fact that you have to juggle multiple set lists and music in all of these multiple bands that you play in. And this is even the case if a lot of the multiple bands that you play in do the same type of music. It's likely the case that there are going to be at least some differences in the way that each band performs these songs. They may do the songs in a different key, the feel of the song may be different, or the structure of the song may change from, band to band, where one band, takes out a verse and the next band takes out a chorus or whatever the case may be, and then the other band does it just like the recording. Or the intros and outros may be different from band to band and things like that. So you may have one song that you literally play in 3 or 4 vastly different ways. So now a set list of what would be like 25 songs is now technically a set list of about 75 or 100 songs, depending on which one of the bands you play with. And guess what? You have to show up and be ready to nail them in each band that you play in. And this means that your memory has to be good, or you have to keep copious amounts of sheet music and charts or things like that, or both, and you have to practice and rehearse more frequently. And not to even mention, you got to figure out how to gel with all of these musicians in the multiple bands that you play in. And this is just a lot of stuff to endure, even for the best of us. So this is something that is definitely worth pondering in your multiple band situations, or again, if you're considering playing in multiple bands. So look, this really just all comes down to loyalty and reliability. It's not that playing in multiple bands is inherently wrong or inherently bad, and I'm sure a lot of musicians handle it very well, but it's likely the case that they are the exceptions. What this is about is the ramifications and repercussions of spreading yourself and your talents, through multiple bands at the same time. A band is essentially a relationship. And it's just like a relationship with a significant other. The more time, energy, and effort that you put into that single relationship, the more potential that it has to become better or become great. But if you're juggling multiple relationships at one time, it's not only likely going to be the case that each of those relationships are going to suffer, or at least they're not going to be as good or as great as they can be, but you yourself are going to get the reputation of not being loyal, dependable, trustworthy, and devoted. And this is kind of the same way that it plays out in these multiple band situations and relationships. Now, I promised you at the beginning of this video that I was going to give you a key way to deal with playing in multiple bands, and it's this. It's actually really simple. It goes like this. Have one primary band that you play with and make the rest of the bands secondary. And how this works is you have one primary band that you give your loyalty to. So if a situation comes up where, all of these bands are getting a date or a gig on the same date, your loyalty goes with your primary band. And this keeps things really simple. It also solves the problem of not being loyal because you've given your loyalty to one band and you've expressed, to these other bands that, hey, I have a primary band that I play with and I'm not going to be able to do these things with you if something comes up. So if a date comes up where we both get a booking, I'm going to have to go with my primary band. And that's being upfront with people and letting them know. So again, you don't get that reputation of not being trustworthy. And you have to think about this as well, because this means that sometimes you're probably going to have to turn down a gig with the secondary bands that pay more, or maybe a better gig, or maybe a more fun gig, to stay true and to stay loyal to your primary band. But that's just the way things go. It's like in the significant other relationship that I just mentioned. There are going to be a lot of other, women or men, whichever one you're into, out there that may look better than your spouse or the person you're with now. But you're going to have to turn them down if you want to, build this relationship and stay loyal to this single person in this relationship. So it works the same way in the multiple band situations. But all in all, making one of the bands your primary band and the rest of the bands secondary prevent you from running into all of these problems that I've mentioned in this video. But the question is for you. Do you play in multiple bands? If so, how do you handle playing in all of these multiple bands? Like, how do you handle the set list and learning all of the different songs from band to band? And how do you make determinations about which band you're going to play with if two or more of the bands get a date on the same date? Jump down in the comments and let me know. I definitely want to hear your thoughts on that. And listen, thank you so much for watching this video. I really do hope that it was helpful for you and gave you some insight about the subject of playing in multiple bands. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel and like this video. And here are some other videos that you can check out right now.